Hey everyone, welcome back to Code of the Row. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to properly set up some sort of HP boss bar in Ascent Combat Framework, and let's get started. So the first thing that I need to do is actually head over to my ACF character BP. So I'm just going to open up my default pawn class. It doesn't matter if you're in the full sample or ultimate, this works for both. And I'm just going to keep clicking this pencil icon to open the parent in editor. I'm going to click it again until I get to ACF character BP. So right here. And I'll just close the others so it doesn't get confusing. And once we are at the root of the blueprint file, which is not the parent class or not the C++ class, just the first blueprint under the C++ class, we're going to go into the event graph and set up a few things. So first, I'm going to add a component of a sphere collision. And this sphere collision, I'm going to call it something like boss indicator, just like that. And in the viewport, I'm actually going to have to increase the size of this just to see what will overlap. So I think I'll set this to something like 9 just for now, maybe a little bigger, just because the bosses will take quite a big distance. And this looks good to me. I'll just adjust this later. And the first thing I'm going to want to do is with this sphere collision, I actually need to set up some of the collisions for this sphere. So what I'm going to do is make sure this is selected and scroll down in the details until you find this collision tab. And I'm just going to make sure character step on is no, and the collision preset will actually just be custom. And then for this, I'm going to make sure that it's just query only. We don't really need any physics to this because this is just an overlap event. And then the object type will be set to team 2 or whichever one you are having your bosses on. So me personally, I'm just going to have all my bosses on team 2 because all my mobs are just going to be against me and the NPCs that guard my town and stuff. And for team 2, I'm just going to click on this ignore just so all of them are set to ignore. And I'm just going to set overlap to team 2, and you can do 3 and 4 just in case, I guess. And I'll hit compile and save. And this is totally fine for me. So the next thing I'm going to do is head over to the event graph. And now in the event graph, we're actually going to make some on sphere overlap conditions for our boss indicator. So I'm going to scroll down into the event section over here and click this checkmark for on component begin overlap and on component end overlap. So I'm going to add both. So that's the begin overlap, and I want one for on end overlap. And now what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to drag this out and I'm going to cast to some sort of ACF boss BP. So for my enemies, all I really want to do is just make some sort of boss class. But in this case, I'm only going to have one boss for this. So I'm just going to do it specifically for this character. But this is just a very specific child of the ACF full enemy. But you can just call this ACF boss, for example. And then you can make more children of that so that all of these bosses will be the only ones getting a large HP bar on the bottom of your screen. Kind of like Dark Souls or Elden Ring. But in my case, I'm going to use this Goblin Champ character who is just absurdly insane. So I don't need this guy open, but this is the class I am going to be casting to. So now I'm going to cast to this character, which casts to Goblin Champion BP, and he will be the other actor. And so if you have some sort of ACF boss class, all the other ACF bosses will be able to spawn that HP bar. But in my case, I only have one boss. And now if this is true, we want to create a widget. It'll be a widget that'll spawn onto your ACF character's viewport and anyone else who's in your party, maybe everyone online that you're playing with, and so on, or anyone who's just near this boss. So what I need to do is actually create this widget. So in my ultimate folder, since I am using the sample, I'm going to look for a file called I'm going to look for this character info WBP. And if we double click it, this is actually our targeting component. So whenever you target enemies, this is the health widget that gets set above their name or above their character. So I'm actually just going to go over here and duplicate this. And I'm going to duplicate this and call this something like boss info WBP or underscore WBP. And I'll double click to open this up. And I want to change from desired on screen to fill screen. And now I'm just going to play with the settings to size this appropriately. So for the vertical box, I'm going to uncheck this size to content and set the X to 1600 and the Y to something like 100. And for the health bar, I'm going to right click and wrap this with a scale box. And this is just personal preference, so you can really do whatever you'd like. And now for the scale box, I'm just going to fill both vertically and horizontally. And then for the health bar and for the scale box, I'm just going to leave this as is. This looks pretty good to me. So I think I'll actually change this to scale to fit X just so it's always full. And then for the health bar, and now let's see for the health bar, this looks pretty good to me. I don't really need to change anything here. And for the name, I'm actually going to just horizontal alignment this to the left and add a left padding of something like 20. And now for the vertical box, I can actually increase and decrease the size of this however I want. So now I'm just going to anchor this to the bottom middle, 0 the position X and Y, put an alignment of 0.5 to center this, and put this alignment on the Y axis of something like 1 or maybe 1.5, just so it's up here a little. So this is the widget blueprint that I need to worry about. This is the only widget blueprint that I need to actually create, and this will do. Because if we go into the graph, and since we duplicated it, it's going to have our initialization of the character info, the initial stat bar that's getting the health bar from the character. It's going to cast to the ACF character that we're working in and set the text of the name. And that's really all we need in order to display our boss HUD. So now that we've created the designer, that's all we need to do. Now we can go back to our ACF character. And now in my ACF character, I'm going to assign that boss info WBP right here. And I'm actually going to right click and promote this to a variable just so whenever we end the overlap, we can actually remove this widget once the overlap's ended. So I'm going to call this something like boss HUD ref for a boss HUD reference. And then from here, I will actually initialize the character info. And that's actually coming from our Goblin Champ BP or your ACF boss. So now that we created this variable, we just need to initialize the character info like so. So I'll drag this out and look for the init character info like this. This will initialize our character whenever we overlap our boss. And the pawn owner will be the ACF boss class that you created, or for me, it'll just be this Goblin Champ. And then I want to add to viewport. So I want to make sure it's initialized before I add to viewport, just so that we don't have some sort of, just so it doesn't get emptied out. And the target will again be connected to this boss HUD reference variable, and we can hit compile and save. And now I want to make sure that when we end the overlap or when the character gets destroyed and so on, we just need to remove this boss HUD reference from our parent. So all I need to do in order to do that is boss HUD reference, grab this out, get boss HUD reference, and now we'll look for a remove. We'll look for a remove from parent. And I'm just going to connect this to here, but I actually need to add an is valid node that will also reference our boss HUD, or else we're going to get some errors because we need to make sure that this is in the scene and the character isn't disappearing, just to make sure that boss HUD reference is a valid class. If we don't do this, it will just pop up errors whenever you end your play session. So I'll just connect this to the input object. And basically, if boss HUD reference is a valid object, it will remove from parent on end overlap. So now when we hit compile and play, we should see our boss HUD whenever we get near him. So now let's test this out. So you'll see my boss is standing over there. And when I go near him, his HP will spawn, but I set his aggro range pretty large. So he will probably just start running towards me. And when he gets near me, you'll see that he does. I forgot I set his HP to like 1 for testing purposes. And when he disappeared, the HP bar went away too. So let me restart this because I would just want to show you guys that the HP bar does disappear if I go away a certain distance. Actually, let me first increase his HP to also show you guys that it does update. The HP will still remain. And this will probably change if you have some sort of regen setup on your ACF. Hit play. And now when he gets close, you'll see that. There we go. So now I'm going to leave. Make sure his health gets updated. Make sure he doesn't catch up. Man, he runs faster than me. So now let's test this out after we upped his HP. So I'm going to go near him or have him come to me. And now I'm just going to run away from him. Oh my God. He's too fast. And now you'll see that the HP bar does despawn if I leave a certain distance. And he also does, it is updated. So it's going to stay and spawn exactly at the correct info. And you'll see that when I kill him, the HP bar does despawn along with the character. And that's how you make an enemy health bar using Ascent Combat Framework. Thanks for watching Code with Ro. Like, subscribe, comment below what you want to see next, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.